Bill Johnston, and you're certainly welcome to be here this morning in my wood turning shop. This morning we're going to concentrate on turning a piece. It's like a platter with a bowl in the middle, but concentrate also on color, various kinds of techniques that I use, and some little carving through the color, and in the hopes that it might be useful to some of you out there. We'll start out with a piece of cherry that you'll notice has been laminated. It's been laminated out here on the sides where these laminations won't interfere with the bowl portion of the piece in here. In fact, if I've done a good job laminating, that won't even show later on. I put it on a faceplate. This piece measures about, 17 inches. Now you'll notice I have the tailstock up here. I don't really need the tailstock, but I'm going to put it on just long enough to accurately mark the middle of the bottom for me, because later on I'm going to need that when I turn the bottom. We'll start this out at a fairly slow speed. I'm going to do almost all of my turning with a fingernail ground gouge. In this case, it's a 3/4 inch gouge. And we're just going to quickly take this down and we'll turn the bottom. I will leave my hand away for a moment here just to show the angle of the tool and how it's catching the wood. But you can see also why I'd like to deflect the shaving. I'm going to turn a foot that will be accommodating a 4-jaw chuck. All right, I'm approaching the shape that I'd like for the bottom. I'm going to reduce the foot just a little bit more, and then I'm going to concentrate on trying to get as smooth a cut as I can to avoid a lot of sanding, try to get rid of some of these rough spots in here. For this, I'll move to a 1/2 inch gouge. I've gotten rid of most of the bad dig out areas here on the rim. I've got the gouge pointing upward, which means that I'm cutting with a shearing cut, and I'm trying to take off very little here, just to get rid of any of the roughness of some earlier cuts. And this, of course, the intention here is to reduce the amount of sanding. You can see a slight amount of tear out right here, and just right here where I have this slight movement from the bowl into its rim. And I'd like to get rid of as much of that as I possibly can. I'm going to use as much of the edge of the tool as I can. It's ground well back. And I want to be very delicate with the cut. Nothing aggressive here, just some fine shavings being removed. All right, now I think I've reached the stage where I can sand this. You'll notice that there are some slight rings from a cutting tool, but those are easy to sand out. What's not easy to sand out would be the dig-ins that one might get. There's a slight one right here. Nothing serious, but if it can be taken out by cutting, it's much better. Makes a much better thing or sanding. I'm going to want to sand right up to this foot. I'm going to take this V-groove tool, and I'm going to go right in here at the foot and create a little bit of a depression that will allow me now to bring the sanding right up to that edge. I'm going to turn the shoulder which will allow the four-jaw chuck to strike that right there, and any marks on the four-jaw chuck now will not be on the finished bottom of the piece. I don't want the piece to strike down here. I want the edges of the jaws to strike up against that and hold it firmly. That way I'll get a very true reverse. So when I turn it around to turn the opposite side of the piece, it'll run very true. All right, I'm going to do some sanding. I'm going to start out with my compressor with some 80 grit paper, and we're going to quickly take this down through about 3 stages of sanding with this sander. Then we'll move on to a softer sander for finish sanding. little 400 grit. And a little 600 grit. I'm now going to mark the back for some grooving that will take me on up to the point where I had laminated the piece. And so I'll mark about every 5/16 of an inch. To color this portion, we'll quickly run some masking tape around this portion right here. Okay, we're going to trim off the tape at the grooves. If I can locate the grooves here underneath. There we go. I'll just identify it with my fingernail in this fashion. Now we're going to take some acrylics that you can get at any paint or hobby shop and one of these sponge paint brushes, and we're going to just quickly blacken the back of this, getting it into the grooves. All right, now that I have applied a good liberal coat of acrylic on this, I'll let it dry. If I come back later and see that there are some places that it's soaked into the wood, like right here, for example, and here, those are areas that I can pick up again and lightly recoat after it's dried. Once I put on a finish coat of lacquer over the top of this, then of course I wouldn't be able to apply any more acrylics. what I'd like to do now in mounting this piece into the four-jaw chuck is to make certain that the shoulders of the outer edges of a chuck catch into that shoulder very nice and square. And we check for it being true, and there's very, very little wobble in the piece. Even out at the outer edges, there's very little wobble. So now I can go ahead and tighten it up. This is a Wolverine jig, which I'll now adjust to the angle that I had these tools sharpened. Now we're set to turn the top. I'm going to concentrate first of all on this area here to get the rim, because the further on out you go, then the thinner this becomes, the more play there's apt to be in the piece. So I want to get the rim turned nicely, then we'll worry about the inside of the bowl portion. This is the edge of the lamination, and I don't want that to show up in the bowl, so I'm beyond that right now, so I'm all set there. Oh, we got a chip out of here. A bad one. You'll notice that the edge of the platter is not flat this way. It is indented on a slight angle inward. Now that's about as thin as I'd like to go with that. That's not very thick at all. It's quite thick there. Out here it's about maybe just a shade more than 1/4 of an inch. So I'll take it down in here just a shade more. Okay, I don't see any tears or rip-outs or anything there. Now, in preparation for sanding, I'm going to do what I did on the back. I'm going to put a little groove right here. That will permit me to sand right up to that edge. Even though I'm going to lacquer this portion, it's very important that that be sanded very, very well, because any imperfection in the sanding, even with lacquering and carving through it, any imperfections will certainly show up. We'll remove this now from the lathe, but leave it attached to the four-jaw chuck because I don't want to lose the centering of the piece. This time, instead of using acrylics for coloring, we're going to use black lacquer sprayed with an airbrush. This is a rotating table which will permit me to swing that around. Okay, now that we've got the front edge lacquered, and I will be carving through this lacquer, and one of the reasons I use lacquer or prefer lacquer is that it's a surface finish, and if I carve through that, it will give me a nice clean cut. If I use a dye or a stain or something like that, as anything that's very liquidy will float into the wood, soak into the wood, and it will leave, especially at the end grain, it'll leave areas where the fibers have absorbed the stain deeply into it, and so the cuts are less than clean. Now, I don't mind these little grooves in here at this point. They are easily sanded out. What I didn't want to have is a bunch of scraped end grain portions there. Let's take a scraper now and deal with the bottom. I want a nice flat bottom. I don't want any dimples or any nipples there. Avoid sanding in the middle. Sanding in the middle very frequently creates a slight depression in there. It's very hard to get out. Better to have a slight rise. I can always sand that off. going to use this carbide bit that cuts just little V grooves in the piece. I'm going to place it here in my grinder, which I'll then use to carve out in an abstract fashion around the edge of this piece. I think we'll call that quits there. We're going to apply aniline dye into these cut areas. You can see why I like to use lacquer, because it just is impervious to the water, and I can get the dye into the cutaway areas very easily. Okay. We're going to now take this piece off the chuck and reverse turn it to finish off the foot. To reverse turn it, I'll use this padded dome-shaped piece, which will fit snugly into the bowl portion of the bowl, platter, whatever. And before I started, I marked the center with the tailstock So now it should be just a matter of bringing up the tailstock to the middle and voila. Now the marks from the chuck are gone. I'm now going to knock off the tip here.